So the story that happened today is that the Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy announced that he was beginning proceedings to remove the leadership of Catalonia and to take over basic services of Catalonia, including the police force and the telecommunications services. So, as a little backstory here, there has, well, for decades, there has been a movement for independence in Catalonia. Catalonia is a region in northeastern Spain that includes Barcelona. Hey, let me show you a map of Catalonia right now. Why don't I do that? Just so you can see what we're talking about. Probably should have had this up originally. But anyways, I'll just show it to you right now. Here's where Catalonia is in relation to Spain. There's Catalonia. That's not the best map, but there's Catalonia. It's in the northeastern part of Spain, and that's where Barcelona is. So anyways, Catalonia has had an independence movement going on for several decades, but it's really picked up over the last few months. Catalonia had an independence referendum they held, I believe, about a month ago, and it was quite controversial because the Spanish government did not want them to have this independence referendum, but they went along and they had it anyway. And as those of you who watched Right Side Broadcasting's live coverage saw, Spanish police showed up, shut down a number of the polling stations. There was violence. So in the aftermath of that, the president of Catalonia declared independence. But then he said, well, we're declaring independence, but we're going to suspend the independence. We're going to suspend the independence, and we're going to give a little time for negotiations. But negotiations haven't really gone anywhere. And now the Prime Minister, Rajoy of Spain, really seems to want to shut down this independence movement for good. And he has said today that he is initiating proceedings to remove the leadership of Catalonia and hold new elections in Catalonia to replace the leadership and take over basic functions in Catalonia, like, as I mentioned before, the police force and telecommunications. And he says he can do this, Prime Minister Rajoy, because there's a part of the Spanish Constitution, the one that was their newest one from the 1970s, although I don't know if they had one before that, but this Constitution came after Franco in the 1970s. And there's an Article 155 of the Spanish Constitution, which basically says if a region isn't working toward the national interests of the government of the country can do what they want to in the region and take power in the region to the extent that it addresses this issue. That's not the exact language, but that's the general idea of what the Article 155 says. But Article 155 has never been invoked by the Spanish government, but Prime Minister Rajoy says he's going to invoke Article 155 of the Constitution and take over the leadership of Catalonia. And Catalonia does have a bunch of, they have a bunch of autonomy in a lot of fields anyway, for example, health and education, but they are still subservient to the Spanish national government. And so we'll see what happens. I guess the Spanish legislature have to approve this, but they're expected to approve it maybe as soon as this week. And what happens then? Does the Spanish government try to enforce this? Do they send in troops to arrest the leadership of Catalonia? If that happens, are there like riots and stuff? I don't know. And another interesting point here is that it's a bit unclear how much of Catalonia supports independence. A fair amount does. I've seen estimates around 40% from polling, but those polls I think were before the referendum. So in the referendum, some people think the referendum and the violence involved in the referendum might have increased the number of people who wanted independence. So it's certainly not all of Catalonia wanting independence, but a fair amount of it does. So, and a passionate part of Catalonia wants independence. So a really problematic situation could happen if, say, later this week, the Spanish legislature confirms the proposal or approves the proposal of the Prime Minister to remove the Catalonian leadership. And suppose Prime Minister Rajoy sends troops into Catalonia to arrest the leadership and maybe shut down the parliament there or something like that temporarily, or take over the police force. He said he wants to take over the police force. Do we start seeing armed resistance to that? Do we start seeing armed resistance to that? It seems like a very dangerous situation there in Catalonia. So we'll be keeping an eye on it this week and see what happens. There are demonstrations going on today in Catalonia about this. The Catalonian president, Carles, see if I can pronounce this right, Puigdemont is supposed to speak tonight on this issue. And but we'll be watching the situation in Catalonia. If you have any thoughts about what's going on there, feel free to reach out to me. I am at Lookner on Twitter, at Lookner. Happy to read your comment on the air. So give me a shout on Twitter if you want. And also, I wanted to go over, I thought there was a helpful article in the Wall Street Journal about this situation, which I was going to read you some of. But before I do that, let me just say this is Right Side Broadcasting. Thank you, by the way, to the moderators in the chat rooms on the website and in YouTube for doing your great work moderating the chats. And also, we are viewer supported, so if you enjoy our coverage of different news events, please consider making a donation. You can donate by going to the $ at the bottom of the YouTube chat or going to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. And your donations keep us on the air. All right, so let me just do a quick check. I don't believe anyone's messaged me yet about this, but I do like to check and make sure. But feel free to write in and give your comment on this situation at Lookner on Twitter. So let me show you this article here that I thought was helpful. This is from the Wall Street Journal, just came out today about the events of today. Spain moves to seize control of Catalan government, call regional elections. Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy seeks to use measures to quell a push for independence in Catalonia, as we spoke about. So I won't read the whole thing, but I'll give you certain parts of it here. Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy asked lawmakers to grant him unprecedented power to remove the leaders of Catalonia and temporarily control the region from Madrid, a forceful move aimed at bringing the separatist movement to heel. And he said Spain's central government ministries would administer the region's agencies until new elections are called, a bold shakeup meant to quell Catalonian leaders' insurrection. And here's a little bit about the details of what the Prime Minister wants to do. The Prime Minister will seek to convene regional elections within 6 months to bring in new leadership and put an end to Catalan leaders' repeated defiance of the central government. The measures will focus in particular on oversight of security, public order, and financial management, the central government said. It will also seek to restrict Catalan lawmakers' ability to approve some laws. During the past 2 months, separatist regional lawmakers approved an unauthorized vote on secession and later signed an independence declaration. So we're talking about the Spanish government taking over the leadership, pulling out the current leadership, holding new elections for that region, and preventing the legislature there from doing everything it wants to do. For example, I don't think the legislature would be allowed to call a new independence referendum. And now here's a really key paragraph here. This is key to me. It says, during a press conference, this one right here. During a press conference, Mr. Rajoy demurred when asked about how the central government would ensure that Mr. Puigdemont and his 13 cabinet members would obey the order. That's really key. So, it's one thing for the Prime Minister to say, we're going to remove the leadership and take over the government there in Catalonia. And it's another thing for the legislature, the national Spanish legislature, to approve of this proposal. But it's another thing entirely to enforce the proposal. Now, maybe Prime Minister Rajoy hopes that now that he said he's going to do this, Catalonia will back down. Maybe he hopes the president of Catalonia will say, okay, we take back our declaration of independence. We're not declaring independence anymore. And maybe he sees this as maybe a bargaining move. But as we saw with the independence referendum a couple weeks ago, Prime Minister Rajoy is not afraid to use force. We saw when Catalonia tried to hold its independence referendum, we saw Spanish troops go in there, Spanish police and I don't know if they're called troops or police or whatever, but Spanish forces went in there and violently broke up a number of polling places, and we saw them, grabbing and manhandling and punching and kicking sometimes even women and older people. So he is not afraid to use force in Catalonia. And so, seems like there is a possibility here of them going in and forcibly removing the leadership of Catalonia, and who knows what happens if that ends up happening. Who knows what follows from that. So we'll be keeping an eye on that here at Right Side Broadcasting, keeping you up to date on what's going on there. If you would like to write in, write to me at Lookner at Lookner. Oh, I wonder if there's an issue here. No. So David Opp says the audio in your new studio sounds hollow, not as good as before. So we just moved into this. This is our new studio, the new RSBN2, my home studio we just set up in Atlanta. And thank you for the feedback. We've only done a few streams from here, and I'll have to listen to it. It's possible the room is different, so maybe I'll listen to it and see how the audio sounds here, and I can always try making some adjustments to that. But thank you. Any other feedback you have, write to me at Lookner on Twitter. Let me know. That's really helpful. Thanks. By the way, if you want to know when we're coming on the air here at Right Side Broadcasting, we come on with these breaking news videos all the time. So if you want to know when we're coming on the air, subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell, which will result in you almost always getting notifications. However, some people, including myself, because I'm signed up for notifications, did not get a YouTube notification about this broadcast, so I apologize for that. Also, you can follow us on Twitter. That's always a good backup at RSB Network. We always post out links to our live videos. And also on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting. Follow us there. And I am on Twitter at Lookner on Twitter. And I will be posting about this situation even when we're not on the air covering it. So follow me on Twitter if you want breaking news videos. And I see some of the moderators want to give a shout out. Barbara, JC, Guinevere are all in the YouTube chat room. And Common Sense, and I think there's another one. Who am I missing? Hold on a second. Let me check my notes here. I always forget the second name, and I apologize. For the website, for rsbn.tv. Glenn O and Common Sense. Thank you for moderating at rsbn.tv. And let's see here. Some people are saying they got an alert in Twitter. So just so you know, Twitter is a separate alert from YouTube. The Twitter is just us posting. We don't have a problem with that. Once in a while, the automated YouTube alert system has some issues. So we will contact them about that. Anyways, so let me just flip down and show you here about, does this talk about Article 155? Yes, so down here in the article, where I am right here now, oops, here. The Prime Minister is invoking a two-sentence article from Spain's constitution that hasn't been used since the document was approved by Spaniards in 1978 during the country's transition to democracy after the death of longtime dictator Francisco Franco. Summoning the sweeping powers of Article 155, Mr. Rajoy said today, was a last resort. And I wanted to also, I found an interesting article before about what Article 155 says. See, what I'm looking for, I would love to find just a translation, but here is one which had some quotes from it. What is Article 155 of the 1978 Spanish Constitution? This is from Al Jazeera, and you can see here it says Article 155 is only two short paragraphs of the 1978 Constitution. It says that if a regional government, quote, doesn't comply with the obligations of the Constitution or other laws it imposes, or acts in a way that seriously undermines the interests of Spain, the national government can ask the Senate to vote on the use of the measure. The Constitution states that an absolute majority must approve the article's use. If this happens, the national government may adopt the necessary methods to force a regional government to comply in order to protect said interests. The only directions given state that the national government may give orders to all authorities of regional governments. So it's pretty sweeping power here. It's never been actually used in the 39 years this Constitution has been in existence. So we'll see if it ends up getting used in the next couple weeks. Thank you, by the way, Jerry OOOG gave a donation and said, RSBN, the live best in live coverage of breaking news. Thank you, Jerry. That's what keeps us on the air, your donations. So if you'd like to donate and support our news coverage and keep us on the air, go to the bottom of the YouTube chat, click on the $sign at the bottom of the chat, or go to rsbn.tv/donate, rsbn.tv/donate. Sadhar Mapundarika says, after reading some articles, it appears the main push for Catalonian independence are more extreme Marxists and activists. So, now, I have not heard that this is the main push. I don't know the exact composition of the amount of people. But as I said before, polling even before the independence referendum suggested 35 to 40% of the population of Catalonia supported independence. And a couple million people roughly voted for independence out of the 7 million or so people in that population actually went to the polls and voted for independence in the referendum. I don't believe those are mostly Marxists, but I'm not an expert on this. But that's just from my reading. I haven't read that, but I'm certainly not an expert on the composition. In terms of them being activists, well, I would say that some of them are activists. There are a lot of people out there defending, the polling places and stuff. But I'm not familiar enough to the situation to really be able to intelligently characterize the demographic and the ideological makeup of the people voting for independence there. I'm sorry. I wish I was better able to address your comment. But thank you for writing in. Troy Hudson writes, and there's no way outside communities will allow violence beating down the people again. So what you're saying, Troy, is would, like, say, the EU, you think the EU, for example, outside communities, I'm assuming you're talking about other countries like the EU, would not allow the Spanish authority to go in there and commit violent acts to remove the the leadership and the governing authorities in Catalonia. I'm not so sure about that, just because the reaction to the violence during the independence referendum was quite muted. I mean, there were some leaders who spoke out against it, but on a whole, the EU reaction to the police, the Spanish police coming in and violently shutting down a number of the polling places during the referendum, and again, violently, including violence toward women and older people, unarmed, by the way. The reaction was quite muted, more muted than I personally thought it was going to be. So I don't know if other countries would necessarily do anything about this. So, but a good question you raised, Troy. Doug Nipples says, could the Catalonia independence supporters request UN intervention? Well, I'm guessing, well, now they are not a UN, Catalonia is not a UN member state because they're not a country. I'm guessing anyone could go and appeal to the UN for something. I'm like, for example, I'm guessing an oppressed minority of a country could probably appeal to the UN. The question is whether the UN would hear the appeal and do anything about it. My thought on this is off the top of my head. I can't imagine. It seems to me like most countries, at least so far, have considered this an internal matter for Spain to deal with. Also, a number of countries, have minorities in their own country, and I've read that a number of countries don't want to support the independence movement in Spain. For example, some European countries don't want to support the independence movement in Spain from Catalonia because if that movement is successful, they think, oh, well, this minority in our country or this region in our country, they're going to be emboldened and they're going to declare independence next. So there's a motivation for a number of countries to not want to support the independence movement and see it be successful because they're worried that their country might start start breaking apart too. So even, you know, I don't know technically all the technicalities of this, but even if they could, you know, they certainly could, you know, write a letter to the UN or whatever, but I can't imagine that the UN would take action on this unless there was like, you know, unless you had the Spanish government going in there and shooting people or something like that. So that's, I mean, shooting, you know, not shooting with rubber bullets and stuff, but like actually killing people. So that's my thought, off the top of my head thought, but a good question, Doug. Thank you for writing in. Okay, so so we have been talking about the Spanish Prime Minister saying he'll remove the Catalonian leadership and also move to take over some of the basic functionings, including the police force of Catalonian government, as when the Senate approves it in Spain, and they're supposed to do that maybe as soon as this week. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye here on Right Side Broadcasting for you. And I think at this point I've gotten to all your messages. Doug Nipple says, thanks for the response. If violence breaks out, peacekeepers maybe. Yeah, you know, and I should say this, it's a good point you raise. You know, right now, you know, there's a lot of threats going on, but the problem is if you never know how things are going to spiral. So let's say later this week, the Spanish Senate approves the Prime Minister's proposal and says, yes, Prime Minister, we approve you acting on Article 55 and going in there and forcibly removing the leadership of Catalonia. Let's say when Spanish police, and also, you know, taking over their police force. Let's say when the Spanish forces go to do that, there's violent resistance. What happens then? Let's say a couple people get shot and then more forces are sent in to Catalonia and the violence goes greater. Once that happens, you could see, you know, once violence starts happening, you don't know exactly where it's going to go. So I really hope this doesn't happen. I hope there's no violence, but there has to be a worry that if violence starts happening, it will spiral, and we could see it get to a place where the violence is really bad and some outside group feels like it needs to go in and intervene. It's certainly not at that point yet, but it bears watching, and it's a dangerous situation. Old Guy 1947 says, I am confused. Are we talking about California? Sounds like it. I think your point is not that California sounds like Catalonia, the word, but that you hear about California wanting to secede or do their own thing. I think, Old Guy, I think that's what you're saying. Troy Hudson says, in this day and age, I don't believe you can stop independence. They have to remain strong, though, and not cave in. And, you know, there's another part of this is just it's not everyone from what I've heard in the media over a long period of time. Not everyone wants, and from what experts say, not everyone in Catalonia wants independence. I don't know if the situation would be different if like everybody there just wanted independence. But at this point, it seems like it's a little roughly under half of the country or of the region wanting it. So that complicates matters too. But, well, you know, and it's, you know, if I knew somebody in Catalonia who didn't want independence, I'd be interested to talk to them and saying, like, what do you think of, you know, your leadership declaring independence? Because there are a lot of people there who don't want it. So, very complex situation. All right, I think I've gotten to your messages. I think we're going to wrap up this stream for now. Just wanted to come on and give you an update about this. We will be covering news. If it happens during the weekend, we always keep our eye on the news and cover breaking news when it happens. Again, if you want to know when we're coming on the air, subscribe to us on YouTube, click the notifications bell. And most times you'll get a notification. Again, I literally never got a notification about this broadcast, so I apologize. I'm sure there are others like me who didn't get a YouTube notification. We are going to reach out to them and say, hey, what's going on with that? But subscribe to us on YouTube, click the notifications bell, follow us on Facebook, Right Side Broadcasting. On Twitter, we're at RSB Network, and I am on Twitter at Lookner, always posting about breaking news if you'd want to follow me there. And just a thank you to Jerry for making a donation. We are viewer supported again, so if you want to keep us on the air as an alternative to mainstream media, give us. I'm guessing, by the way, that if you did that, I'm pretty confident that MSNBC, CNN, and Fox none of them did a stream of this length or did news coverage of this length of the Spanish story today. If they did, I bet they did like a 2-minute piece. And I'd probably take a bet that if you added up all their coverage of the Spain story today, it would not add up to the time that we spent in the single stream on the Spain story. So they're probably just focusing on the phone calls to. They're probably still focusing on the whole phone calls to a military families thing. Not that that shouldn't be covered at all, but they spend like 75% of their time on it in the last 3 days. So I'm exaggerating a little bit in terms of percentage of time, but they spend a lot of time on that. So we want to cover other stories here that we think are important too. So, but we rely on you to stay on the air. So if you like that we're on the air giving this coverage, please consider donating. Go to the YouTube chat, click on the $sign at the bottom of the YouTube chat. You can donate that way, or go to rsbn.tv/donate. rsbn.tv/donate. You can even set up a monthly donation and get cool free stuff in return, like this right side mug. So you can find about that at rsbn.tv/donate. Okay, I want to say thanks to the moderators in the chat rooms for moderating the chats, and as usual, doing their great job. And thank you for everybody for watching on Facebook, on YouTube. And we will be on the air if news happens, big news happens, whenever this weekend. So keep an eye out for us on Right Side Broadcasting. And that's going to wrap it up for now. So thank you, everybody in the chat room. Thank you, everybody, for watching out there. That's going to wrap it up for right now. And that's all I got to say on this. We'll keep an eye on the situation on Catalonia. It's a dangerous situation. So we hope there's no violence, but we will be watching it for you. Okay, for now, I am Steve Lookner. This is Right Side Broadcasting. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody, until we see you the next time. And we'll see you soon.